As thyroid thrivers, we hear a lot about the adrenals and the link between thyroid health and adrenal health. Well, what are the adrenals and why do we hear so much about them when it comes to thyroid healthy living? That's what we're going to be exploring today with my special guest, holistic nutritionist and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, Hope Pedraza. We'll talk about the significant relationship between the thyroid and the adrenals, what to be aware of with adrenal dysfunction, and how you can support both your thyroid and adrenals. We'll also cover some popular health trends that may be doing you more harm than good when it comes to your adrenal health. Hope has a wealth of information on this topic, so if you've been struggling with things like low energy, sleep issues, trouble with exercise, or weight gain, in spite of doing all the things, this is an episode you don't want to miss. It's going to be a great show, Thyroid Thrivers, so stick around. Hello, Thyroid Thrivers. Welcome back to another episode of Thyroid-healthy Bites, a weekly podcast dedicated to helping you live well and eat well so you can feel well. I'm Ginny Mahar, your host and the face behind the apron at hypothyroidchef.com. Welcome back to the show, Thyroid Thrivers. Today we're going to be talking about the adrenal thyroid connection, and I've got a very special guest to share with you. Hope Pedraza is a certified holistic nutritionist, nutrition coach, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a hair tissue mineral analysis expert, Reiki practitioner, human design guide, as well as a comprehensively certified Pilates instructor and founder of In Balance Studio. Wow. She helps women heal their body from chronic gut, hormone, thyroid, and autoimmune issues and live in freedom with functional labs, energy medicine, and chakra balancing. I love that. Hope is a host of the fast-growing podcast, Hopeful and Wholesome. She's a wife and a mom of two littles, and she lives in San Antonio, Texas, where she's joining us from today. Welcome, Hope.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you on the show. I'm really excited to dig into this because we haven't really covered adrenals on Thyroid-healthy Bites yet. But before we dive into the show, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and your personal health journey and what brought you to the work that you do today.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple different routes that brought me on this path. Part of it was my own health journey. I grew up with a lot of digestive issues as a kid, in and out of doctors and hospitals and the endoscopes and the colonoscopies and all the tests, the probes and the poking and all the things, all for the final doctor to just tell me like, oh, you have IBS, which is like code for, we don't know, your stomach is messed up, right? There was no like protocol or direction or anything. That was just kind of the end of it. And, so as I get older, I started just reading and educating myself. And I really became fascinated with the human body, how it works and how it functions. And I was also, my background is in dance. So I loved movement. So just anything about the human body was just fascinating to me. And so as I continued to read and educate and inform myself, sometime in my 20s, I decided I had read some books on like gut health and healing and different things. And I'd read some books on a plant-based diet. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just try that, see what happens. And so the next day I woke up like, okay, I'm going to be vegan today. And so I just went cold turkey and decided I was going to do it. And it's just my personality. I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but it's just how I do things. And for me, and this isn't to advocate everybody needs to be on a plant-based diet, but for me, it was a total game changer. Like I had terrible allergies too. Like my allergies cleared up. My gut was like totally transformed. My skin was clearing. All these things were happening. So for me, it wasn't like, okay, everybody needs to be plant-based. For me, it was, holy cow, there's something to this like nutrition thing that's affecting my body, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that just kind of set me on the trajectory of wanting to help women understand the same and really getting to the root cause. And that's what I do as an FDN-P. It's getting to the root cause. And so I think that just kind of fueled my drive to, dive in to educate myself more. And, I got more certifications and diplomas and all the things just to really dive in to be able to help women on that same kind of path and understanding. I think it's part just understanding how their body works. I think that's the other piece is we just don't understand how especially as women, we just don't understand how our bodies work. And I just don't think we're taught very well, unless you go to med school or something and you're taught, have a bunch of science classes you take. I just don't think we're taught like just the basic, like how our body functions and our hormones and all these things. And so I want to be able to empower women with that. And then also helping them get to the root cause of their chronic symptoms and issues going on in their body.
Awesome. So much of your story is so relatable. I think when we find, that things like the food we eat or the daily habits that we have can make such a dent in how we feel after we've been struggling and struggling. A lot of us for years, sometimes decades, like you, since a very young age. It's so empowering. And then we just want to shout that from the rooftops and make sure other people know, there's so much more you can do. And there's a lot to it. And I couldn't agree more, especially with women's health. I mean, we're really on a shared mission here to educate and empower other women about all the things that you can do to support your health, to understand the way your body works, whether you're trying to conceive, whether maybe you're approaching menopause. I mean, there's so many different seasons of our lives as women. And, the adrenals really come, just, they fit right into that whole picture, don't they? As something that a lot of us aren't aware of.
Totally.
A good friend of mine just found out she has a completely flat cortisol curve and she's a very high achiever. And it's this doesn't surprise me at all, because this is so common. And we're left wondering, why can't I keep up? Why can't I be the things I used to be able to do? And anyway, just kind of a side note.
No, I agree. Well, and I have the same, that was kind of another part of my health journey. I had the same thing. It was kind of when I was going through my FDN training, you have to do all the labs on yourself. And I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist, but it still creeps up every now and then. But my personality is, type A perfectionist. And I did some of the labs myself and found out holy cow, my adrenals were totally in the toilet, mine too. I was barely functioning on cortisol. And I'm oh crap, no wonder I've been feeling so tired all the time. And, I wasn't necessarily getting sick all the time, but when I would get sick, it would take me forever to get rid of it. It would just be this lingering thing. And all these dots were connecting in my head where I just kind of pushed those things aside. No, I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to, so yeah, I have a similar experience as your friend, and then again, understanding how our bodies work and, oh, wow, I've totally just crushed my adrenals because I just don't know how to stop. So yeah, it happens.
Well, I know we could just start jamming on this, but for the listeners who, aren't really familiar with the adrenals and the role that they play, why don't we kind of back up and begin at the beginning? Can you talk to us? Just, what are the adrenal glands? What do they do?
Yeah. So the adrenals are these little bean-shaped glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And their basic role is that they're responsible for managing stress, right? So they help you make steroid hormones like cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline. They help you control your heart rate and your blood pressure, metabolism, and your immune system. And really and truly, their big role is in the stress response and managing stress. And so this is why I think women too. It's prevalent in men, but especially women, I don't know, I could get in my soapbox for this. There's a lot of reasons why it affects women more than men, but just our drive and our ambition and we want to just do and do and do and not stop. Our adrenals work a lot, especially when we're stressed. And so when we're chronically stressed, we're just driving our adrenals over the edge because they're constantly having to pump out cortisol. And it's this constant release of cortisol and adrenaline. And so it just kind of perpetuates that cycle of being in this chronic stress state.
So what are some of the common signs and symptoms of adrenal imbalance that, when you're meeting with clients that go, oh, there's an adrenal red flag?
So fatigue and energy is a big one, which I know that's kind of a generic symptom, but fatigue, low energy, people who have trouble maybe recovering from workouts, sleep issues, waking in the middle of the night, usually waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. is a good indication there's some sort of cortisol, something going on. Getting sick a lot, right? Your immune response, your immune system is kind of bleh. Maybe you have heart palpitations. Some people have high blood pressure. Some people have low blood pressure, because that's the other thing too with the adrenals. And I probably should have mentioned this when we're looking at kind of how the adrenals function and this kind of phases of adrenal exhaustion, I guess, right? There is such a thing as good stress. And I like to mention that because cortisol is important. And everybody's like, oh, cortisol is bad. Like, no, but our bodies need cortisol. Our cortisol is kind of our get up and go hormone. Like it helps us get up in the morning. It gets us through, acute stressful situations. Animals have cortisol. Like it's what helps them. It's the fight or flight response, right? We need that to help us get out of a stressful situation. It's when it's chronic that it becomes a problem. And so when we're in a stressful situation, our cortisol rises, but the goal is to get your cortisol back down, right, to homeostasis. So when we stay in that chronic space for too long, eventually, if you think of kind of a bell curve, so you kind of ride up the curve when you're in a stressful situation, you kind of sit there at the top of the curve. If we don't come back down from that situation, we're going to go to the other side of the bell curve. And that's when we start to get in that chronic state of exhaustion where you're just full adrenal exhaustion. So that's when like I was mentioning my cortisol levels just like in the toilet. So basically your body, your adrenals just get so tired of pumping out cortisol. They're like, I can't do it anymore. I can't keep up with you. And so you get into the state of exhaustion. And so when you get into that really exhaustive stage, when you really start to see, like the really like glaring symptoms, at least in my experience with my clients, where it's like, it may be anxiety too. I've had a lot of clients, anxiety, depression, immune issues, sleep issues, even other hormonal issues. It's going to affect your other hormones, blood sugar dysregulation, thyroid issues. So it's going to show up in a lot of different ways.
What's your favorite way to test the adrenal?
So my go-to is the Dutch test. It's a comprehensive hormone test. And so we're able to look at the sex and the steroid hormones. And I like the Dutch test because it's going to look at your cortisol patterns. So get to see, kind of what your cortisol is doing throughout the day. But then we're also able to look at like how your cortisol is being converted in the liver, how it's being cleared out. And so, because that really helps us get to the root cause. Because I should say this too, like our hormones are never the root cause. Like hormones are just another symptom of something else going wrong. And so I like the Dutch test because it does help you go that 5, 6, 7 layers deeper to really see what's going on with like how our liver is converting things and our liver detox pathways and stuff. But the Dutch is my go-to.
I'm a huge fan of the Dutch test. It was life-changing for me having one done a couple of years ago. I'm probably due for another one. And that was how my friend actually discovered her cortisol curve. I think that cortisol curve is a good visual for some of us visual learners. Can you kind of describe like what a normal cortisol curve is? Because I think that also illustrates like cortisol isn't the bad guy. We need cortisol. Exactly. Cortisol gets us out of bed in the morning. It's when things go wonky with that. So can you kind of talk to us about like what that looks like on paper?
Yeah. So your cortisol, like you said, and like we've mentioned, it's kind of your get up and go hormones. So your cortisol should be highest in the morning, and then it kind of wanes throughout the day. So it should be highest in the morning, and it should be lowest at night. So it's highest in the morning. Sometimes it can elevate a little bit, and then kind of throughout the day, it's kind of this curve that kind of goes down and down and down, and at the end of the day, so your melatonin and your cortisol kind of move in opposition. So that's another good visual I like too, because most people know melatonin helps them sleep, right? I think we're all familiar with melatonin by now. And so our melatonin and our cortisol should move in opposition. And so our melatonin starts out low in the day, right? And then it gets higher at night. Our cortisol should start higher at the day and then lower at night. And so this is why things like waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. is a good indication that there's some sort of cortisol thing, because something's waking you up, right? Sometimes it's a blood sugar issue, but in my experience, a lot of times it's a cortisol issue. So if we have kind of this wonky scale where it's waking up in the middle of the night, it's a good indication that our cortisol levels aren't that steady low level where they're supposed to be while we're sleeping.
I always think of the thyroid and the adrenals as like either they're besties or they're frenemies.
It's so true. It's a really good way to put it.
And then it's like a chicken and egg thing. Like what kind of dysfunction happens first? There's that really significant relationship between the thyroid and the adrenal glands. And that's why we hear so much about this as thyroid thrivers. Can you talk to us about the adrenal thyroid connection?
Yeah. And you're so right. I did an interview last week with a thyroid doctor. We were talking about that because I was saying the same thing too. It's a chicken or egg situation. Did the wonked out adrenals cause the thyroid issues, or did our thyroid wear out the adrenals? Like, right. So they do work so closely together. And the thyroid really, so let me start from the top. So you have what's called the HPA axis, right? So it's the hypothalamus, which is in your brain, the pituitary, and your adrenals. And this is kind of your driving force for your endocrine system. And so the hypothalamus part is kind of receiving and sending signals to the pituitary, and then it sends it to the adrenals and all the other glands. So your thyroid is kind of taking its cues from the adrenals. And the adrenals are kind of the oil and gas for your thyroid, which is kind of the engine, right? It's the engine for your metabolism and all that. And so when your body is in stress mode, our adrenals are, sent into stress mode. They're sent into overdrive. We're producing more adrenaline. We're producing more cortisol. And this is telling your brain, that hypothalamus part of your brain, to stop stimulating the pituitary gland, your thyroid hormone. It's like, okay, we're in stress response here. Because when we're in a stress state, we're in that like fight or flight state, all like extraneous things stop, right? The only important things are like our heart and our lungs. Like we need to run away. That's, it's that primal part of us. And so now we're not producing as much thyroid hormone because we're in this stressed out state. And not only that, but cortisol really, it goes to these thyroid hormone receptors to make them less responsive to thyroid hormones. So when we're constantly pumping out thyroid, now our body is less sensitive to our thyroid hormone.
That's a great explanation. So what are some of the common triggers then of adrenal dysfunction?
So, I mean, the blanket answer on this is stress, right? I mean, stress is what's causing it. And this could be, and, stress is such a vague word these days because it could be so many things. It could be situational stress, right? It could be, stress in your relationship or your job, whatever. It could be chemical stress too, like the things that we're exposing ourselves to, whether it's food or it's chemicals in, self-care products, whatever. There's so many stressors in the body. We're exposed to these every day, but it's this kind of compounding effect that has the real effect on the adrenals and on the thyroid, right? That it's just kind of one thing after another and just kind of stacks up. And then there's so much stress on the body that things just start to malfunction.
I think too, our stress tolerance is like so high, like just culturally.
Totally.
And, like as women, as moms, as working moms, like our state of stress is kind of crazy.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. Well, and I think, the body is so resilient and it's so adaptable. So I think that's the other thing. I was explaining this to one of my clients the other day because, we get into this, we know homeostasis is where we want to be. It's like that baseline where everything is functioning. I'm using air quotes here, normally, right? But then things start to get imbalanced and dysfunction, but then we kind of build this new normal. So then our body adapts. So then all of these things that are out of balance becomes like the new threshold, but we don't realize that that's like, you've been totally kicked out of balance. And I think that was it for me too. Like learning about my adrenals, my body had adapted, whereas like, I didn't feel sick all the time, but then looking at it, I'm like, wow, I'm headed in a really bad direction here. Like if I don't reverse the car and go the other way. So I think our body is just, we don't understand how adaptable our body is, which, in the short term, it's fine. But what are the long-term implications of that? We think of autoimmune issues, those are usually building up in the body for 3, 4, 5 years before they show up. So, what are the long-term implications of us allowing our bodies to adapt to that stress and live in that state for too long?
And stress is such a root cause. I mean, it's like the root cause of most disease,
Everything.
right?
Yep, totally. Yeah, it really is.
So, okay. And then just like, thinking about stress too, I think of it like, kind of like cortisol, the stress hormone. It's not always the bad guy. There can be good forms of stress too.
Exactly.
Like thinking about things like exercise and, really wanted to, ask you about your thoughts on like some of the popular health trends that are out there right now with food and fitness that could, contribute to adrenal dysfunction. What are kind of some main suspects for you out there? Because so many of the people I think that are drawn to us, like as health coaches, as, you're a practitioner, all of that, these are often very healthy people doing a lot for their health. And there's that cultural mindset of more is always better, right? You know, so yeah, can you kind of take that and run with it?
For sure, for sure. And I'm so glad you asked this because I think it's so important. And I think it was today I did a post about this because I had a woman come into my studio. I have a Pilates studio. And I had a woman come into my studio, using this as an example, and she was telling me that she just wanted cardio. That's all she wanted. She said, I just want cardio. And I'm like, okay, like, let me ask you about that. Like, why are you just looking for cardio? And so she starts telling me she hit menopause and she started gaining all this weight and her hormones are all over the place. And she's like, I just need cardio. So it led me to this conversation, which I don't really think she soaked much in what I was trying to explain to her, because she even said like, oh yeah, one of my friends told me that I should go see a functional practitioner to check my hormones, but I just don't want to take a bunch of supplements. I'm just going to do cardio to fix everything. And I'm like, it's not how that works. But we are in this mindset. And, every time I think we've shifted this mindset that like cardio fixes everything and cardio is like the only thing we need or the best thing or whatever, I'm like, oh crap, we're still there. We're still having this conversation because, and I've been the same. I went for years with disordered eating behavior and I was an obsessive exerciser, which was another reason my adrenals were in the tank. And so I've been there, I've done that. And I know what it does to your body. And I think that's the other piece is a lot of times when I'm working with clients where their adrenals are just like totally shot. The exercise piece is an important piece to pick out because yes, movement is great and exercise is great. But like you said, exercise it's a stress on the body and it can be a good stress on the body, but it can also be the bad stress to the body. And when our adrenals are already tired and they're struggling, it's just fanning the flames or just pouring more fuel on the flames. And so things like high intensity exercise and there's a lot of, I don't want to call anybody out, but you can use your imagination. There's a lot of big name franchises out there that are so hyped on that high intensity exercise. And that's all they do. And I love a good cardio workout. I'm not saying I don't do cardio. I love a good cardio workout, but like at my studio, we offer everything. We have the strength, we have the toning, we have the yoga, Pilates, we have HIIT classes, but we don't have HIIT classes every day because I don't want people doing HIIT classes every day. Like it's not ideal for our bodies. And really, like I was explaining to this woman who was in my studio, the research actually shows that it's strength training that's helping people lose the fat, right? That's what we want. We want to help our metabolism out. We want to lose fat. It's not from the cardio. It's from the strength training. It's building muscle. Muscle helps your metabolism out. So I think there's just this disconnect on these types of exercise. And I have found that cardio and just like that either like long cardio sessions, like, running on the treadmill for hours or the elliptical or whatever, like long stints of cardio or too much high intensity exercise can be really damaging to the adrenals. And I just don't think people are talking about that enough because I think a lot of times it's doing more damage than good. And I've also seen that firsthand. I have people who come in from said big name franchises who hype on the HIIT classes to my studio because they're like, crap, my body is like broken. Like my shoulders, my back, I've hurt things, my knees are hurting. And they want something that's kinder to their body, that they're not like beating their body up every day of the week. So yeah, I just think that the HIIT thing is a really big hit to our adrenals. And then the other thing that is kind of, I think it's controversial. That's just me, but is the intermittent fasting, which you had brought up before we started recording. And it's a similar thing as the HIIT, right? We can see it as a good stress to the body. And there are certain circumstances where it can be a good stress. I can get in my soapbox and talk about this though, because I also don't think it's right for women and the way women do it. So we really look at the research for intermittent fasting. The research was done on men. Men and women are not the same. Women's hormones and men's hormones are not the same. Women are not tiny men with the same hormones. Like that's not how it works. So it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work like that. So yes, I think there are situations where intermittent fasting could be helpful. And I think when it's done right for a woman, it can be supportive, but the same thing where exercise is, can be a good stress in the body, but it can be a bad stress. It's the same thing with intermittent fasting. This can also be a bad stress because when you're going that long without food, that's a stress to the body. Your body goes into like starvation mode. Like, hold on, like I haven't had anything to eat. My blood sugar is like plummeting. My brain's telling me like, hey, you're going to die because you haven't eaten. So it's a stress to the body. And when our body's already stressed out, when our adrenals are already struggling, you're just fanning the flames.
You know what I think about intermittent fasting, and I've used it. I've experimented with it for sure. Like my brother used it with success to lose weight, but as you mentioned, most of the research is done on men. And I think using intermittent fasting very intermittently might be okay for me for whatever that's worth.
Totally.
But what I think is so appealing to people about it is it gives us an excuse to not have to make breakfast.
Yeah,
And to be able to skip that meal.
Yeah.
And
That's
what
such a
I'm
good point.
finding now at 46 years old, needing to update my weight loss and fitness strategies with, more strength, less cardio.
Sure.
By eating breakfast, like this is my new experiment I'm in right now. I wasn't getting enough calories.
Yeah.
So I was in too much of a calorie deficit.
Yes.
And so by switching to not just eating breakfast, but like a savory, high protein breakfast.
Totally.
It has actually moved the needle on the scale for me.
I believe it.
You kind of question, like exactly what you're saying, as women in different seasons of life.
Right.
I think we have to be careful with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, that's why I always tell my coaching clients, it's not a yes or no answer. It's a gray area and it can work for some. And I certainly have worked with people who it has worked for, but it's one of those things you really should work with a practitioner while you're doing it. Use care, track your energy levels, really pay attention to how your body is responding, because we all want that like quick fix. Oh, this is I'm not even hungry in the morning anyway. Now I have permission to skip breakfast.
Yep.
It may not be the best thing for you.
Right. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Well, and that's such a good point you brought up about not being hungry in the morning. And I talked, because I have clients too, where I'm we're working on blood sugar regulation, because that's a huge thing for your adrenals, is regulating your blood sugar. And so I tell them, like, some of them come to me and they are doing intermittent fasting. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. You can go back to doing that, but we're not going to do that right now. You're not going to do that while you're working with me. We're going to work on blood sugar regulation. And that means eating regularly. And for a lot of them, they're not used to eating breakfast. And for that, like what you're saying, well, I'm just not hungry in the morning. Okay, well, what time do you get hungry? And it's like hours after they've been awake. And I'm like, this is a problem. You have hormones in your body that are supposed to tell you when to eat and when not to eat. So I see that as a problem. If you're not hungry and you've been awake for hours, then there's some hormonal things going on, because your body should be sending you signals like, hey, it's time to eat. It's been since, last night at 7:00, it's time to eat. So I think I see that as issues too, as when our hunger cues aren't, sending the right signals, and we're not hearing those signals, we're not feeling those signals. Like there's some things going wrong. And a lot of times it goes back to our adrenals and the cortisol levels and just imbalanced blood sugar, because that's the thing too with the adrenals. When your cortisol spikes, your blood sugar spikes. Like our cortisol and our blood sugar go hand in hand. And so when your cortisol is all over the place, your blood sugar is all over the place. Like it's just like double whammy with the stressors on the body.
And I swear, like we come to this point every single episode, it's not one thing, it's all the things. And that's why all these little things like making time daily for self-care, for stress management is so important. And something that I think a lot of us resist. It's like the first thing to get bumped off the schedule.
Totally.
When we're busy. When we're busy working, momming it.
That's it. Yes, that's it.
Or whatever. A lot of us just have a lot going on.
Yeah.
At any age, in any scenario, any kind of circumstances, we're all, facing our own set of challenges in life. And I think, undervaluing the importance of self-care is one of the easiest pitfalls that we make. And I know on my own healing journey, it's become like, and I've certainly lost my way with it, plenty of times I have to write myself, come back to my self-care practice. But every time I do, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot.
This is the thing.
I forgot how huge this is.
It really is.
How totally enjoyable and pleasurable it is. Oh, I'm ready. I am ready for my meditation time. I'm ready to get in my sauna bag or whatever.
Yes.
So
I love
what
that.
are some things that we can do to like do a really good job of supporting our adrenals?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, like you're saying right now, it's the stress piece and it's the self-care piece. And I know this, I just find, like you're saying, it's the thing that goes by the wayside the fastest, but I also think it's like, it's not like the sexy thing we want to talk about, because we're like, no, tell me what supplement to take. Like, tell me what diet thing, like, what do I not eat? What am I not supposed to be eating? Where, I mean, yeah, sure, supplements and diet have their place, but none of that's going to do a thing if your nervous system is a complete wreck and we can't, manage your stress in your nervous system. So that's the biggest piece. And so, you know, uh, figuring out what that looks like for you, what the stress management piece looks like for you, regulating your nervous system piece, and implementing some sort of like self-care mindfulness practices into your day, into your week. And then the other piece, my first I guess first steps when I'm helping people heal their adrenals and kind of manage is always the minerals. As you mentioned before, I do the HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis. I'm a certified HTMA expert, and that's always where we start. The minerals are, like, you've probably heard this, right? The minerals are the spark plugs in the body. Like, they're literally what's causing every reaction in the body. So our hormones, our enzymes, like nothing can function without the right mineral, not even our vitamins. Like, our vitamins need minerals as cofactors. And so nothing is happening in the body without minerals. It's what's happening at the cellular level. Like, it starts there. And so for our adrenals, that's where I like to start. It's balancing the minerals out, which is why I always do an HTMA on my clients. And starting with the big ones, like for sodium first and foremost. And I could talk about sodium all day. We could have a whole other episode on sodium. But sodium, I'll give you the short version. Sodium is, your adrenals use more sodium than any other part of the body. And I think sodium, kind of like carbs, has gotten a bad rap over the last, I don't know, a lot of years, 50, 60, 70 years, because, we're told by our doctors that, it gives you high blood pressure and it can cause strokes and all these things. And if you really dive into the research on sodium, they've done research on others, like cultures that have high sodium diets, and they're not dealing with high blood pressure and strokes like we are in the Western world, or at least in America. The issue is not a sodium intake problem. It's a sodium retention problem. Because it's where we're getting our sodium from. So when we're getting it from processed foods and table salt, your body is just soaking up all of that. And it's a sodium retention problem, right? So our our bodies need sodium. Our adrenals need sodium, especially when we're looking at adrenal fatigue and exhaustion, all of that. Our adrenals, they're just pumping through your body's source of sodium. So when I'm helping my clients kind of rebuild their minerals and things with the sodium piece, where you probably do this to your clients, or at least you've heard, like, adding salt to your water, and people are like, it's a weird thing for people. Like, oh, my doctor told me not to eat too much sodium. Well, yeah, like, you don't need to be in table salt. Like, there's a difference between table salt and unrefined sea salt. It's like the equivalent of white sugar and like an unrefined, version of that, right? Because table salt is the equivalent of white sugar. It's been stripped of every nutritional value, right? It's literally just the sodium chloride. When you look at an unrefined sea salt, there's anywhere from like 85 to 95 other trace minerals in that salt that's pushing the sodium where it needs to go in your body. So your body's not soaking it up and retaining it and causing things like high blood pressure. And so, my recommendation is always Celtic sea salt. I think that's the best quality, but whatever unrefined sea salt you want to get is fine. But I just think that's the best one in terms of micronutrients and trace minerals and all the other things. So sodium first and foremost. Vitamin C is another thing that your adrenals use a lot of. So vitamin C and sodium are two really supportive ways that you can start to heal your adrenals. B vitamins are another thing that can be supportive for your adrenals. Magnesium, and magnesium is one of those I could talk about all day. It's used in so many functions in the body and so many reactions in the body. It's another one of those, like sodium, that gets depleted so easily when our adrenals are just running in overdrive. So I think starting there with sodium, magnesium, vitamin C, and B vitamins. I know B vitamins aren't minerals, but they're cofactors that go along with that to build the B vitamins. But I think that's a good place to start. Adaptogenic herbs are another thing. Adaptogenic herbs help your body cope with stress. And so those are another good supportive way. It helps your adrenals be able to kind of manage stress a little bit better. I guess that's an okay way to say that. But those can be supportive too.
I'm actually drinking my Tulsi tea.
Love it. Yes. Yeah, so good.
The show. Yeah, I love this. Holy basil is an adaptogenic herb.
It's perfect.
Yeah, I love that. And
yes,
Huge fan of Celtic salt, of course. And I was thinking about the recipe on hypothyroidchef.com that I have for citrus chia fresca, where I talk about it as like an alternative to sports drinks because it's like salt, orange juice, lime juice, coconut water, and chia seed.
It's perfect. You got the potassium, you got the, I love that.
And it was kind of inspired by the adrenal cocktail.
So,
are you a fan of that?
I am. Yeah. I like the adrenal cocktail. It's something I encourage my clients either, make their own version, or you can get, there's like the powdered one, which, doesn't taste good. Definitely tastes better when you make it yourself and you use the orange juice and the coconut water and all that. But no, I love that. And I love, any opportunity people can get all of these things from real food. That's the goal, right? And that's what you do. And so I think I love that recipe is perfect. Being able to put the electrolytes with all those supportive adrenal minerals, like that's perfect.
It's highly chuggable.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it is.
Refreshing. And when you look at sports drinks, I mean, they have sodium in them, but they also have all these artificial colors, high fructose corn syrup, tons of calories. Like they're just not really the best option when there's so many other nutrient dense whole foods that we can use to support our bodies in a better way.
Absolutely.
Kind of similar like approach or idea, I guess, behind it, but in a way that doesn't come with all the negatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey Thrivers, I just wanted to pop in and mention a fantastic way to support your adrenals. So if you're listening to the show today and feeling like this is me, I need this, I'm dealing with all these symptoms, I know I'm overstressed, I'm overcaffeinated, I'm overexercised, or what have you, I want to make sure that you know about this special offering that is perfect for you. It's called the Calm Kit, and it features everything a thyroid thriver needs to refresh, de-stress, relax, and unwind. I've created this offering and I did it working with some of the leading experts in thyroid health, wellness, and exercise to create this special collection of healing meditations, restorative movement videos, calming breathwork videos, soothing recipes, and so much more. Stress, it's a part of life. We can't really cancel the stress in our life, but you don't have to let stress get the better of your health. And this is so important for us as thyroid thrivers. The Calm Kit puts so many thyroid-healthy ways to unwind at your fingertips. So if you want to learn more about what's inside, you can check out the Calm Kit at hypothyroidchef.com/calm, and I'll drop that link in the show notes for you as well. All right, back to the show. All the negatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there other foods that come to mind that you think of as being adrenal supportive?
I think the thing that came to mind when you mentioned food, it's not so much what to eat, but it's something to be careful with, is coffee and caffeine. We didn't talk about this, but I find that is a big thing to talk about with people because people are really adamant about their coffee. And I'm not saying I'm anti-coffee or anything like that, but it's kind of one of those things like the intermittent fasting or the exercise where it's like, it can be fine or it cannot be fine for your adrenals, right? And the fact is that caffeine, not specifically coffee, but caffeine in general, it has a neuroexcitatory effect. Like it does stimulate or release the cortisol in the body as like a stressor. So it does excite the body and the brain as a stressor. And so that's something I have to work with my clients. And when they're working with me, they got to get off the caffeine. I'm not saying you have to get off of it forever, but as part of the healing process, healing the adrenals, you want to mitigate that stress response as much as possible. And the caffeine is just another way that we, stimulate that stress response. So the caffeine is what came to mind first when you asked about food. But, other than that, I think for me, a lot of times I love the, what you just said about the electrolytes, because that was going to be my other thing is, really getting good electrolytes from foods. And it's because when we look at the minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium, those are the big mega minerals, right? The big four that we need the most of. And so for me, we kind of start there. And, supplements are great, but they are literally that, to supplement. I don't want you to get all of those nutrients from your supplements. So looking at food, coconut water, avocados, bananas, those are the best sources of potassium. You need so much potassium And we need around 4,000 to 4,500 milligrams a day. Most of us aren't getting anywhere near that. And when you're looking at thyroid issues, it's a lot. It's a lot. It is. And when you're looking at thyroid issues, people with hypothyroid, whatever kind of thyroidism you're looking at, your potassium is what helps the cells with the sensitivity to your thyroid hormones. So you really need to hone in the potassium when you're looking at, healing your thyroid and managing your thyroidism, whatever it is that you're working with. So potassium for me is a big one, and getting foods, and it is going to help your adrenals. All of those electrolytes are going to help, because it's going to help with the fluid balance in the body and intracellular, all the things going in and out of the cells. Magnesium, I mentioned before, but things like nuts and seeds are a great way to get in. It's really good for your hormones. I talk about seed cycling a lot with my clients. So nuts and seeds are good, full of magnesium and zinc, and which is great for your immune system, which also works with your adrenals, helps with your immune response. So all of those good electrolytes, or anything that has those, potassium, magnesium, zinc, all of those are going to be really supportive for your adrenals.
You mentioned hair tissue mineral analysis. It's amazing what our hair can show us about what's going on in our body mineral wise. And, it's been a while since I've had that done, but it really, I guess I'm realizing in listening to you, like how much it really taught me about minerals. And, I do think more about, am I getting enough electrolytes? Am I getting enough potassium? Sodium, all that stuff. I think it can be a really great awareness building exercise for not only like what's going on in our bodies, personally, but how those spark plugs, as you call them, affect how we feel, affect things like our adrenal health and our thyroid function.
I mean, it's true that one little lab tells you so much about what's going on in your body. I mean, you mentioned the adrenals and the thyroid, and it shows, how your nervous system is functioning, and your carb metabolism, and your liver, and your hormones, and, your estrogen balance. There's so much you can tell just from looking at your minerals. It really does. It is a wealth of information.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Hope. This has been so fascinating. I've learned a ton from you. I'm sure the listeners have too. I'm so glad that, we met, and you have been on the show today to share this with us. This is such an important topic for us, any of us with thyroid issues. And I think just, especially for women, as we have kind of just, it's been like a theme of the show. Adrenal health is really important, even if you don't have thyroid issues, but if you do, there's that very strong link. So this is something that we got to have on our radars. And, the positive thing is there's so many different things we can do to support our adrenals, to stay on top of it so that we don't end up with, a major adrenal imbalance.
Yeah, for sure. It really is an important topic. I think we don't talk about it enough, and I think educating women on this, like you're doing on your show, is a great way to, help women start to heal things and bring balance to their bodies, so we don't get to that point where, we're looking at our cortisol levels and we're like, oh gosh, where did they go?
Right. Yeah. Where's my cortisol curve?
Yes, exactly.
Or inverse or whatever.
Exactly.
And go wonky with that.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us again, Hope, and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ginny.
And to our listeners, thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Thyroid-Healthy Bites. If you've enjoyed the show, please don't forget to like, subscribe, or leave a review. It really does help so much. Hope, before we sign off, how can the listeners connect with you if they want to know more?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm at the Hope Pedraza. Or you can visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com.
Awesome. And you mentioned earlier that you have a free download. Hope has a free guide, How to Remedy Chronic Symptoms with Mineral Balancing the Right Way. And I will put that link in the show notes for everyone as well.
Perfect.
Awesome. I'm Ginny Mahar, your thyroid health and cooking coach, wishing you happy cooking, happy thriving, and the best of health. See you next time.